Okay, so then, if that's all true, the third seal would be the Black Horseman. So let's go there. And when the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." Then I looked and saw a black horse, and its rider held in his hand a pair of scales. And I heard what sounded like a voice from among the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius." A denarius was a day's pay back then. "And do not harm the oil and wine." So, if a day's pay buys you a quart of wheat or 3 quarts of barley, that's enough to make a loaf of bread. That is very expensive bread, right? So basically, does that mean literally everyone just eats bread? And this is talking about end of days with all the technology that will be around then? Probably not. Basically, what this is symbolically pointing to is inflation, food scarcity, dollar crash, supply line interruptions, somewhat heading into starvation, maybe some people starving, but not global worldwide famine quite yet. That's in the next seal. So that's what the Black Horse is all about. It's just like extreme inflation going on. Well, right now it's all over the news. All the preppers are up in arms, going nuts, talking about all the supply. Like if you look at naturalnews.com, you'll see major storable food supplier Augustin Farms ceases operations for 90 days, citing collapsing food supply chain. Red alert: major storable food company ceases operations. U.S. power grid blackouts to occur this winter. Fake White House soundstage confirmed. Let's see. There are reports also that there is like thousands of ships incoming to the U.S. that have been like blocked at the ports because there's not enough semi-truck drivers to get the cargo from the ports to the stores. And so there's like a huge bottleneck right now. And there's even been mainstream media coverage that there's a need for people to start buying their Christmas gifts now, otherwise it's probably not going to arrive in time. So there's definitely supply chain interruptions. There's also been reports of global shortages in terms of crop failures all over the world right now, and huge droughts on the western half of the United States that are affecting the farming yields for this year, and expected supply chain interruptions all over the place. I want to try to pull up some evidence of what I'm talking about just so you can see. The only way to survive winter and poop it's the fan. Let's see. See if some of the headlines pop up here. How to navigate what's coming next. Let's see. Let me try. I'm not seeing it right now. Let's see. Canadian prepper. Let's look at some of his recent videos of what he put out. Do this while you still can. It's all crashing down. Panic buying begins. So this is a good video example.
Hi folks, Canadian Prepper. We got a lot to talk about today, guys. Holy crap. The panic buying is about to start. You need to brace yourself. Luckily, if you've watched this channel for a long time, you're already prepared. You're already ahead of the curve. But the panic is about to start. We're going to see a new wave, which was more devastating than the last, most likely, in the next few months. We're also going to see tensions escalate in China. And right now, my city is saturated in smoke from a massive out-of-season wildfire, which is burning a couple hundred kilometers from here. It is absolutely crazy. So let's talk about it. Especially into the night. Usually during the night, it will kind of dissipate a bit, but it's just so persistent. Start off by saying that you guys are ahead of the curve because you're preppers. There's a reason why 1% of the people control the other 99%. Really, it's like 0.001% of the people run the world. And the only reason why that is because they think long-term. They are long-term thinkers. Majority of people, sure, we're not always the best with money. Prepare for it. They see the future. That's basically how they think. Is the panic buying. It's now gone mainstream. That little Timmy is going to get coal in his stocking. Well, actually, he's probably not going to get coal because the price of coal.
Christmas at risk as supply chain disaster only gets worse. Stock prices of retailers are near all-time highs. Global trade is a mess, and peak shipping has just begun.
Coal has now tripled, which is why China is going through blackouts right now, among other things. But it's gone mainstream, and people are going to start panicking when they start to see the shelves getting thinner and thinner. So fortunately, you are ahead of the curve. I told you last month that I had numerous suppliers sending me memos saying that the prices were going to be increasing around mid-October. Well, lo and behold, they decided to raise those prices even sooner without notifying us. What was once 50% of my distributors who were raising the prices, now they basically all raised the prices. A large part of that has to do with the freight and delivery situation. As you can see here, I do have a little bit of inventory that I've been stockpiling. Whenever a distributor has something, I try to scoop it up. I have a couple more major shipments of food coming in before the holiday season. Oh, the situation between China and Taiwan is getting very intense. China seems to be under a lot of pressure right now with the whole Evergrande situation and the housing crisis there and the increased price of coal. They're starting to already sustain blackouts. People are going to start becoming demoralized there. That's going to lead to low of freight to transport stuff from properly. If it's not, then we can here, in spite of the fact that so many people have been inoculated. But the smart money is saying that we are likely going to see an endemic phase of this. Now, what effect that is going to have on workers and the supply chain is yet to be known. Because, as we predicted, everything on this channel, from the pandemic to the riots to the market crash to the crazy catastrophic forest fires, we also predicted that there's going to be this animosity between those who had the jab and those who didn't. And unfortunately, that too is reaching a breaking point. A lot of people are choosing to opt out of going to their jobs. That's putting even more stress on human resources and supply chains. So what we're going to see, I think, is the perfect conflagration this winter, where we're going to see tensions escalating between China and Taiwan. We're going to see the Chinese economy really start to struggle. That is going to have repercussions over here. We are going to see empty shelves. We are going to see panic buying. It is just possibly going to be pandemonium. Now, I don't claim to be an expert in geopolitics, but if I was trying to save face, and if things were going on in my country, would I try to create a diversion in order to take attention away from that and bring attention to something else? Kind of like how Facebook just magically went down on the same day that whistleblower came up to their aid, and all these countries are going to come to their aid. Supply chain gets cut. It is going to be absolute chaos over here. So I think that the U.S. is going to tread lightly. Maybe there's going to be some kind of subversive strategy employed by the U.S. where they don't get directly involved, but they do so by proxy or something. But what we know so far is that yesterday the Chinese flew, I think it was over 50 planes through Taiwan airspace, and they do this in order to basically fatigue Taiwan's very limited capabilities, because they know that every time they stress on the equipment, hear that it's what I've read, an invasion of Taiwan would take up to 2 million troops. And in order to get those 2 million troops to Taiwan, China has already had some sort of agreement between civilian vessels that they will be ready to transport troops over to Taiwan. At the 12 or 13 particular infiltration, simply trying to push and prod and confuse Taiwan, because it absolutely affects what's going to happen over here. My predictions are as follows. To summarize, I do believe that the panic buying is going to ensue because the mainstream is now pumping the narrative that there's going to be Christmas shortages and you got to get out there and get your shopping done sooner than later. So people are going to be stampeding into the stores in short order. We are going to see another major wave of this thing. It's far from over, in my personal opinion. The only way we may not see a major wave is if they suddenly decide that they're going to stop testing. I have no real predictions with China's economic downturn.
All right, so you got kind of the gist of that. Other videos now in the recommended might relate to this. Get ready for total chaos a month ago. U.S. lockdown's imminent. People are predicting another major lockdown from the flu season. They're going to blame it on Corona and lock us all down this winter. And we saw what happened on the last lockdown. People flooded stores to go get supplies, so then that created store shortages there. Warning, things are about to get very interesting. Labor shortage crisis, how will this soon impact you? The comments are where it's really interesting. Everyone's like, the shit's about to hit the fan. The poop's about to hit, sorry about that. Poop's about to hit the fan. 2021 should be called the year the preppers were proven right. I mean, they're all talking about this stuff. You should see all the comments, like, I think this may be the last call, like, tons of people are, if you read the comments of videos like this right now, everybody's sounding the alarm in the prepper community, like, fully convinced this year is going to be insane. Canadian wheat crops were halved this year. Farmers lost 40 to 50% of crops due to wildfires and extreme heat, meaning there will be a pasta, flour, bread, and anything wheat-based shortage. It's happening in Italy and the UK, so expect to see it here in Canada and the US very soon. Stock up now. The next time you do a grocery run, it won't hurt to pick up an extra bag of pasta or flour. Also, worldwide collapse aside. Okay, so this is not even a Christian. They're talking about somebody as hot AF. This is just somebody that's paying attention to the news and aware of crop failures worldwide. We also have a stock market that's super inflated right now with predictions of that crashing. Of course, you should have a healthy food stock at this point. What I have read on these comment sections, I'm not seeing it right now, and I am getting a little tired. I'm getting very tired. But let me just try to say what I've read on these types of comment sections on a lot of these videos is people saying that their local stores are seeing huge shortages already. That people are already panic buying now. They're anticipating another lockdown and another wave to go along with the flu system. They're anticipating all this stuff, and it's the calm before the storm. And tons of people are going crazy buying food right now and getting ready for a major inflation, skyrocketing, and all kinds of stuff. Let me see. Shelves emptying, prices skyrocketing. Prepare before it hits. A month ago. Urgent, more bad news. Urgent, this is bad. I got a scary message, prepare now. Dire warning of what's coming, do this now. Dark times ahead, it's only going to get worse. So that's one prepper channel sounding the alarm, basically. And now, is his name City Prepper? City Prepping? Yeah, City Prepping was the other guy. Let's look at some of these titles. How to navigate what's coming next, a day ago. Labor shortage crisis, how this will soon impact you. Cargo ship dilemma, how this will impact you. I want to show this real quick because this is like solid just fact. Look at this.
There are a record number of container ships laden with cargo backed up off the California coast. The reasons for the logjam, they're many, but the root cause harkens back to the fact that the supply chain is still in shambles, and it doesn't look to be getting any better anytime soon. It will likely even get worse before the ship rights itself. In a previous video, we thoroughly examined one piece of the supply chain that's currently experiencing problems, and that's trucking. I'll post a link in the cards above if you want to check out that video. This video will look at another equally critical part of the overall global supply chain, and that's transoceanic shipping. I'll explain what's going on right now, what you should brace for, what other systems may fail as a result of this disaster, and what you can do now to prepare yourself for what, at worst, could equate to a shortage of everything as yet another domino falls. This video is a bit longer than normal because the more we research this issue, the more problems started appearing. It's a convoluted mess that we try to break down without oversimplifying the problems. So let's jump in. Please consider subscribing to our newsletter by clicking on the link in the description and comment section below. If you enjoy this video, please subscribe and click the like button to help the channel grow. The complicated failings of the shipping industry that have brought us to this point are many. Still, it is vital to highlight the major problems of the present and recent past to understand how complex a problem is. Once you understand all these reasons, you will see that these problems may persist into the distant future and precipitate a more significant supply chain collapse. COVID. Many of the problems related to the global supply chain stem from COVID. Factory closures and lockdowns through the first part of 2020 ground to a halt the finely tuned supply and demand network. The specific journey of goods before COVID looked something like this. An order was placed, a container was filled, a third-party shipping company found the appropriate space on a massive container ship. It was shipped, received at one of California's 11 ports, but probably either the ports of Los Angeles or Long Beach. It was loaded on the truck chassis or a rail car, transported to a warehouse in your region, and then the product was eventually delivered to your doorstep or store. That was a finely tuned system that could bring products to your door from China in about 2 weeks or less. COVID, it threw a wrench in that system, and the supply chain wasn't prepared for it. Manufacturers in China halted production, and raw material producers were forced to shut down. New intake protocols had to be established at the exporting and importing ports. Ports rely on labor procedures for testing. Even tests needed to be developed. With no goods flowing in anymore, labor cuts were made. Everything, everywhere, slowed down or stopped flowing altogether, and the world waited for a cure, or at least a glimmer of light on the horizon from the long night of COVID uncertainty. While supply had ceased to flow, demand started to skyrocket. Although there was a significant uptick in ships awaiting entry into the port at the start of the pandemic around March of 2020, the backup accelerated significantly by the fall when demand for goods exploded, filling up all available berths at ports and forcing ships to anchor offshore and await their turn. More people confined to their homes started ordering online. With wallets full of their individual share of trillions of dollars of stimulus money, people placed orders for essential prepping items to provide themselves with some insurance against a more significant decline. With money and time on their hands, they started long dreamed about remodeling projects. So, climbing your feet to protect country container ship trying to dock. Wait out at Scopulus, and factories worldwide begin to reopen. 316 from semiconductors in Europe shut down their factories to carry them away. Just-in-time manufacturing collective breath from being trade has resulted in containers on the receipt or even a small group,
This is
in some
going
cases,
into nice
starving to
detail
death.
of
Cargo
what
ship,
is
or cargo ship,
causing the
and foul penalty
backups
should
and
It is a
supply
petroleum
chain
their influence were loaded,
disruptions.
which began fuel costs
He's
being the
very
larger where to put
thorough
the
here.
supply and demand them further because they lack the
I've
merge.
seen an
Reference my other video on
actual map of backed up cargo ships. I don't know. I saw it on a video. A map of it. I don't know if you can just do this on Google Image Search or not, but the point is that there are fact check. Every time I see fact check, I'm like, okay, so they're going to be trying to say, no, there's not a backup of cargo ships. That's what the fact check means. I don't know what, I've never even heard of fact check until recently. Everyone is, look at this. Post spread baseless claims about cargo ship backup. So, factcheck.org just says the opposite of whatever non-mainstream media, quote-unquote, conspiracy theorists say. This is ridiculous. Like, that's all they're doing. So there's entire websites and movements promoted by Google entirely devoted to saying, no, nothing's wrong going on. Just keep going with the mainstream narrative. Get your vaccines. There's not going to be any supply shortages. Don't buy any extra food. There's not going to be any more lockdowns. Everything's going good. Like, just stay with the program. Don't believe any of the stuff they're saying. It's insane. Like, I never even heard of factcheck.org, but now it's like top of Google anytime you search anything that the quote-unquote conspiracy theorists say, it's fact-checked. It's like, what is that? So it's like this whole don't listen to the conspiracy theorist movement. This is never before heard of. It's ridiculous. So anyways, back to 2022 being the third seal, the Black Horseman, according to my timeline here. One seal per year, one horseman per year. 2022 is the third year if we started in 2020, and that will be the Black Horseman. Certainly from some of the evidence I've shown you, and you can do a lot more research, it appears there already is a decent amount of inflation, and that's going to go up by a significant amount, and things are about to get very expensive, and there's going to be a lot of shortages, and a lot of stores will be very scant. But I don't believe it's going to be full-blown famine, starvation in first world countries, but third world countries maybe will be having a lot more deaths. But it's not the big famine seal. That's the pale green horse, has a lot more of that. But the inflation is what was mentioned in the Bible about the Black Horseman. That just the cost of food in general, basically the economy is going to be in a bad spot, and or the availability of food is going to be in a bad spot. We've already seen 10%, I believe last year it was 10% inflation for the year on the US dollar. The stock market gained the typical 6.5% or whatever gains, but inflation went up 10% because of the trillions being printed out by the Biden administration. So you're actually just getting annihilated financially if you have a lot of money stacked away in retirement accounts. It's going down faster than the stock market gains can even go up. So inflation is off the charts right now, and the cost of food skyrockets. We see evidence of inflation already as of 5/18/21, since Biden is printing trillions as economic stimulus payouts to roll out the vaccinations for free. So that's being paid for by someone as well. Also, this is a Shemitah year. This was big. So when we were like midway through the Horseman, and I was just, doing more research to see, could we be in the apocalypse? It seems like we have a decent amount of evidence for the white horse being here. The red horse is kind of iffy. I was thinking the red horse, meaning war, that it'd be a full-blown World War III. Even bigger than World War I and II combined, right? Because this is the apocalypse, right? So I was thinking that, and as I was looking into the next horse being the Black Horseman, which would then fall on 2022, I was thinking, okay, I wonder if 2022 happens to be a Shemitah year. And it blew my mind when I realized it was. I looked it up. It actually is a Shemitah year. And what you guys will see about Shemitah years is crazy. Jonathan Kahn talks about this a lot. Check out, Shemitah years are a big deal. I'd like to find a shorter video here. But let's go with this one.
And let's get to the question. What is the mystery of the Shemitah?
Okay, every seventh day, or it was a Sabbath day, but every seventh year was a Sabbath year, which was called the Shemitah. People have heard about the Sabbath year, but not that it's the Shemitah. So during the Sabbath year, the land rests. There's no buying, selling of anything in the land. Total Sabbath. On the last day of the Sabbath year, Elul 29 is called on the Hebrew calendar. It's a unique thing. There's a wipeout. Financial realm gets wiped out. All debt is wiped clean. All credit's wiped clean. Everything. Now this is to be a blessing. But when Israel turned,
Jubilee.
it leads to the Jubilee. The seventh one. Yeah. But when Israel turned away from God, the blessing of the Shemitah turns into a sign of judgment. When in the days of the prophet Jeremiah, when they're taken to Babylon, the land rests for 70 years. It says for the 70 Sabbaths or Shemitahs. So it can become judgment. So the question is, could this still happen again, or could it be in effect? The sign that concerns a nation in danger of judgment that has known God, but strikes the financial realm, economic realm, and the realm of blessing. And the answer is an amazing yes. And I'll give you an example. In the last 40 years, there have been 5 major collapses, long-term collapses in the stock market. The years are 1973, 80, 87, 2000, 2007. Every one of them is connected to the one before on a 7-year cycle, every one of them, one or the other. In the middle, you have 1994, you have the greatest bond market collapse in history to that day. So you have a collapse every time. And not just it's not just a 7-year cycle, but it's actually at the time of this, it's actually the seventh year of the biblical Shemitah, which actually can mean collapse when you have these things happen. In the last 2, 2001, 2008, you alluded to it. But not only did you have a collapse, but you had the greatest stock market day crash in history happen on the exact Elul 29 day that God appointed to wipe away the financial realm. I mean, the exact day. 7 years later, the end of the next Shemitah, on the exact day, Elul 29, this is once in 7 years, comes the other greatest collapse in American history on the exact day that God appointed. So you have a 7-year, between the 2 greatest collapses, you have a 7-year Hebrew year period down to the day, the hour, the minute, the second, the closing bell. I mean it's really mind-boggling. So, and it's not saying, that God is not, you can't put him in a box, he'll get out. So I'm always dogmatic. To say you can't get dogmatic about it, but it's quite amazing. And it's not only the economic realm, but it also links to the rise and fall of nations. Israel fell during the Shemitah, Babylon rose. So what's happened is an interesting thing is that it also lies behind, it marks the greatest cataclysms in world history, modern history. It marks world wars. 9/11 happens according to it. Nations rise and fall. In fact, America, its rise is tied to a Shemitah that comes. And so, actually more than one. And so the question is, could it be linked also to the fall? And, could there be a change? Well, this present Shemitah, America has been the strongest economic power on earth since 1871, the American age. Well, that ended when the Shemitah began, and the Shemitah can also mean the fall, ended. America's no longer, has been dethroned by China, And so, but the thing is that, so it's happened, really precisely, and I'm not saying it always has to be, but America I believe is racing towards judgment. And so these are danger periods, there. So it's not only the last 2, and then we have this present one as well.
What's for people that don't know the day, what's the date this year?
Well, the date, right now we're in the wake period. In other words, Elul 29 comes with the Feast of Trumpets. We're right now in the Days of Awe, here. And the interesting thing about this one is that two of the Shemitahs, you have this collapse on the exact day, this greatest collapse. But the bigger pattern of all of them has been that the stock market reaches its peak, and then it begins a long-term collapse or a long-term, plunge. That happened this time as well. The stock market has been going up until the summer, if you followed it. And all of a sudden, it's been going down. What's happened? This is the same pattern in the book. There's several patterns, and one of the patterns is 1987, where in the summer it starts tanking, starts going. That's what's happening with this one, following the pattern. It has lost. I just heard this Shemitah has already wiped away $2 trillion from Wall Street already.
It's lopped off 40% off the Chinese market. The Chinese market has
amazing. That's right.
People have fled it.
That's right.
And you talk panic. It certainly hit a panic in Shanghai.
It's exactly right. They told me that it's been $5 trillion from the world. $5 trillion. So it already has followed the pattern. But one of the things about it is that the pattern has been also, and not that we can't be dogmatic, but what happens is then you have the autumn wake period, which is where we are now, and that's often that's usually the time that witnesses the greatest collapses, because it's, in the biblical time you have this wipeout time, then you have it manifested in this time. And the interesting thing, Gordon, is that I'm sure you know this, but people in the financial world have always been mystified. Why do the greatest crashes tend to take place at one time of the year? And what's that time? Yeah, September. So the autumn period. And they always try to figure out what it was, and nothing ever really answered that, because it happened in the 19th century, happens now. But the Bible answers it, because that is the exact period. September, October is the month of Elul Tishri, and that's the time that God appointed in the Bible that for the wipeout, for the nullification or the wiping clean of the financial realm. That is held true. The majority of the greatest percentage crashes in history have happened in that little time period. In fact, within 2.5 weeks on the Hebrew calendar, the majority of them. Everything else happens outside. So all these things. So it's kind of a dangerous period, in that sense. So you look at the greatest point crashes all cluster around Elul 29 of the top 5 all happen around the time of Elul 29 of the Shemitah. So you got all these things. So it's pretty amazing. And really, I don't want people to fear, but I want people to say, to know God is on the throne. What they're saying is God's in charge of everything. I mean, he everything, including the stock market. Not that we've judged our finances, but He is in charge of everything. And then it leads, there's something called the Super Shmitah, or the Seventh Shmitah, which is the Jubilee. And that is, there's a whole other mystery in that every Seventh Shmitah, the 49th year, ushers in really, what we call the Jubilee, the Super Shmitah. And that's when everything gets released, and it says everyone will be restored to their land that they lost. Mm-hmm. Well, 2,000 years ago, Israel lost its land from, it was driven out, lost its possession. So could this mystery of this Jubilee thing, could this actually give us the timing of when Israel is restored and when end time events happen? And the amazing answer is yes. In the book, it's called The Mystery of the Seventh Shmitah. And what it is this: we don't know when the Jubilee is from ancient records. We don't know when they celebrated it, but we do know when they celebrated the Shemitah. And the key is the Jubilee has to happen the year after the Shemitah, because it's the 50th year after that 49th year. So could this have come true? 1917 is the year of the Shemitah. The land of Israel has been under Islamic rule for centuries and centuries.
Ottomans.
Yeah, Ottomans. And so 1917, the Ottoman Empire begins to collapse in that Shemitah. And what happens is that the British army starts marching into the Middle East, and Jerusalem falls. Israel goes into the hands of the British Empire. The British Empire issues the Balfour Declaration, and it's restoring the land, saying this is for a Jewish homeland. This is the Jubilee, that everyone shall return to the land. The Jewish people come back now for a Jewish homeland. When does it happen? It happens in exactly the period of the year following the Shemitah. Exactly in that period, November 1917. If you fast forward to the next Seventh Shemitah, takes you to the 1960s.
67 more. Yeah.
And the period ordained by the Shemitah is September 1966 to September 1967. That would be the year following the Shemitah. What happens is the Israeli soldiers get to the gates. They get to the Jerusalem. Jerusalem is restored again. Everyone shall be restored. And what happens during the Jubilee is you sound the shofar. Well, the first thing that happens when they get to the Temple Mount is the shofar is sounded by Rabbi Shlomo Goren. Rabbi Shlomo Goren was born in 1917, the other Jubilee. He's 50 years old. It's his Jubilee. He sounded the Jubilee. So it's amazing. This all happened according to now.
And 50 years later, it's 2017.
Well, not exactly.
Oh.
Not exactly. Because there's two things. One is because the Jubilee goes by actually the Seventh Shmitah, or the Shemitah and the Jubilee. One is a 50-year period, one is a 49 period. So they would split apart if there wasn't a way of doing it. So from ancient times, what they did is the year the Jubilee comes, it is counted as the first year of the next Shemitah. So it always stays together. So it's 50 years, but it's also 49 years. So where's the next Seventh Shemitah from 65 to 66, and that's the Shemitah. Then the other comes to September. Well, actually, is 2015. The period following the Jubilee period would be September 2015 to September 2016. So we're coming to it right now. And so that would now, not saying God has to do what He did, but if it followed the pattern or the cycle, the super cycle, what it would mean is there'd be war. There'd be war in the Middle East every time. It has been war concerning Israel and resulting in a prophetic end-time restoration. Not that He has to, but those are the parameters.
Let's talk about the perfect storm. You said it's coming. What is it going to look like?
Well, okay, and with the caveat that God doesn't have to follow our schedule, nothing. But there's so much is converging, Gordon. So much happening around. You have what we just talked about. We have the Shemitah. You have a super cycle of this we just spoke about. Same time, you have the apostasy of America. It's racing. America is racing away from God. You have, for instance, just recently you had the Supreme Court strike down marriage as we know it. This is major. We crossed a major line here. And at the same time that there is a biblical principle that before judgment comes an act of desecration. You have it in Babylon when they lift the cups of God to the gods, and you have the writing on the wall. Well, marriage is a sacred vessel of God. If you turn it against its purposes, this is a desecration. And then if you remember, this is celebrated across America with the sign of the rainbow. The rainbow is not of a movement. The rainbow is of God.
Covenant.
It's His vessel. So this is like a double desecration. And the rainbow is about judgment and mercy. And so it's a double. And then the president that night, if you remember, he causes the White House to be lit up in the colors of the rainbow. And this is the highest house of the land, like the Palace of Babylon, the handwriting on the wall. This is a triple desecration going on. So you have this precedes thing. So this is a major thing that we just crossed. And then we have at the same time Israel, America and Israel. Now, one of the saving graces has been that America has blessed Israel. And the Abrahamic covenant says, if you bless, you're going to be blessed. And America has blessed Israel more than any other nation and has been the most blessed nation on earth. That's not an accident. But now we are witnessing at the same time America has been falling rapidly from God. It is also falling away from Israel. Between Israel and America, it's the worst relationship ever. At the same time, you never had them both at the same time. So we're watching that at the same time. We're approaching the autumn. And by the way, the Jubilee that we spoke about begins on Yom Kippur. That's September 23rd. And not that something has happened there, but that starts the 1-year period. So you have all these things happening at once.
All right, so you guys can finish that on your own or whatever. Jonathan Kahn's a fantastic teacher. So basically, Shemitah is a big year and biblical timelines, and it represents some type of major economic collapse, usually economic related, but a lot of big things happened on Shemitah years, as Jonathan Kahn pointed out. And I did my homework and backed it up, and it was really impressive to me. So I'm going to go through my notes a little bit on the significance of Shemitah years, which I created way before I was even on this whole we could be in the apocalypse thing. And so when I realized 2022 is a Shemitah year, and it fell on the same date that I believe the Black Horse, the Apocalypse, the Great Inflation was the same year. I was like, wow, that was the biggest confirmation of them all. That really tied together the White Horse being the pandemic, and then the Shemitah year being the Black Horse, the Great Inflation year, which we're about to be entering now. The Shemitah actually officially kicked off on or approximately September 11th, 2021, and it continues till September 11th, 2022. So during that time frame, approximately, it doesn't have to be perfect, is a Shemitah year, and that's when my time frame approximately for the Black Horse of the Apocalypse is arriving. And that just is super confirmation there. So anyways, Shemitah years, Jonathan Kahn, End Times Prophecy. Okay, that's the name of this notepad file. Shemitah, year of rest, Sabbath year. No sowing or reaping, no buying or selling of the fruits of the land. Purpose is to turn the whole world to God. Rising of nations, nullifying of nations, shaking of things means collapse, means fall, means nullification, means wipeout. Tisri, the most holy month of the Hebrew calendar, is the month that opens up the Shemitah and closes the Shemitah on September/October. Jubilee, prisoners are released, happens around every 7th Shemitah. If you lose your land in the year of Jubilee, it was restored to you. 1871, America becomes the strongest power on earth. Okay, so as far as Shemitah years, September 16th, or September 2000, or September 1916 through September 1917, that's a Shemitah year. America enters World War I. The Russian Empire collapses. Austrian Empire collapses. German Empire collapses. Turkish Empire collapses. Beginning of the rise of America as a superpower. America becomes head of nations. Britain nears financial collapse. America becomes greatest creditor nation and greatest financial center instead of Britain. That all went down in a Shemitah year. September 1917 through September 1918, it was a year of Jubilee, which is the 50th year, happens after 7 Shemitah years, and the following year. This year came a prophetic restoration for Israel. Britain conquered Israel land, which was held by Turkish Ottoman Empire, of Muslims, and declares it home once more for Israel. So that's big on a Jubilee year, big prophetic thing. September 1930 through September 1931, Great Depression on a Shemitah year. September 1937 through September 1938, Second Great Depression. Year world conflict of World War II began. Hitler begins seizing other countries. September 1944 through September 1945, a Shemitah year. World War II ends. War sealed in September/October when it happens. European empires begin to collapse. America begins to rise even more. September 1946 through September 1947 was a year of Jubilee. 70-year Jubilee, United Nations brought Israel into existence through a vote, although they also forbade Israel from touching Jerusalem and gave several sanctions against Israel. 1965 through 1966 Shemitah year, Twin Towers start to build. 1966 through 1967, year of Jubilee, is Jerusalem entered by Israeli soldiers on the Six-Day War, first time in 2,000 years, then entering that holy land. September 1972 through September 1973, major financial stock market collapse occurs. The Twin Towers are finished. America legalized abortion. The world ordered Bretton Woods based on U.S. dollar collapses. America loses war in Vietnam. September 1979 through September 1980, major financial stock market collapse occurs. September 1986 through September 1987, major stock market collapse occurs. These are all on Shemitah years. Big events, world events happen. September 2000 through September 2001, Great Recession. September/October, it happens. Also, 9/11 Twin Towers that represent America's preeminence were destroyed on a Shemitah year. September 2007 through September 2008. Worst year for Wall Street since 2001. Housing meltdown. 2007 through 2008. September/October it happens. 777 point crash. September 2014 through September 2015. Worst year for Wall Street since 2008. September/October it happens. September 2015 through September 2016. Year of Jubilee, 70-year Jubilee. 2017, Donald Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. There were tons of protests, uprising, and violence as a result of this action. The Bible said in the last days, Jerusalem will become once more a nation, and it will be the center of the world's attention and the center of controversy. Jesus said, we will not see him again until the Israelites say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those sent to you, how often I have longed to gather you, your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you are not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate, for I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. For this to happen, they had to survive and return to Jerusalem to say it. They are now heading back to Jerusalem. All the nations are now raging against Jerusalem, which will lead to a world war against Jerusalem called Armageddon, which happens right outside Jerusalem in a field. Jerusalem is now rebuilding the temple, which is the third time it was built, once by David, once by Solomon, and now the final time. The Babylonians destroyed the first temple of Jerusalem, and the Romans destroyed the second one. Each time these distractions happened on the same day of the year. Bible verse about the trumpet declaring, Leviticus 25:9 through 11. Then have the trumpet sounded everywhere. On the 10th day of the 7th month, on the day of atonement, sound the trumpet throughout your land. Consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each of you is to return to your family property and to claim your own clan. The 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. Do not sow and do not reap what grows of itself, or harvest the untended vines. Okay. September 2021 through September 2022 is a Shemitah year, a big prophetic timeline year. And that's the year I had picked out already, without even knowing it, as the Black Horseman of the Apocalypse. This horseman that holds the scales for overpriced food, inflation, market crash guaranteed. So, does there have to be a market crash for it to be the Black Horse? Not necessarily, but that would definitely cement it. So I'm definitely predicting that. I pulled my money out of the stock market like 3 months ago, knowing the Shemitah year was coming. I did that even before I knew that, even before I decided for sure I think that's the Black Horse and the Apocalypse, all this stuff. I was going to pull my money out of the stock market before any Shemitah years, period, based on the history of the stock market collapses happening on Shemitah years. It's just a sound investment decision. I would buy at the bottom and let it rise up. If nothing happened, I'd buy back in right around the same price point I sold off at. I wouldn't lose that much, but I had a lot to gain if I bought at the bottom out period of a Shemitah year, having the cash to do so. You buy when it's low, sell high. So that's a good stock market strategy if you believe in this Shemitah year thing, which is a fact. Okay, so that's a little history behind the Shemitah year being significant prophetically, and the fact that 2022 is a Shemitah year and it happens to fall 3 years after the 2020 White Horseman Corona release, the white horse wearing a crown, the horseman wearing a crown, riding the white horse, and then 2 years later you would have that third seal, the Black Horseman. That the fact that happens to be a Shemitah year blew my mind. I was like excited at the largeness of that confirmation. The fact that we're now entering that, we're in that now, we've entered the Black Horseman now, And we're seeing tons of people talking about rising food prices and grocery stores being collapsed and possibly a new lockdown and backups from container ships. All of this stuff all looks like confirmations that this is going to be a crazy year. And they're predicting rolling blackouts all over the U.S., power outages, which will cause even more panic buying. The price of food would go through the roof if panic buying empties out all the stores, and there's huge shortages of semi-truck drivers to restock everything. So that being the Black Horseman, from a U.S. perspective, definitely fits. And if the U.S. has major problems like that, that's going to have an impact globally. And if the whole world starts going into lockdowns and quarantines, or another large wave of purported cases of corona go through the roof, since the PCR test gives so many false positives, allegedly, the flu season would definitely bring a ton of false positives, which would then bring in new lockdowns and stuff, which would then make even worse supply problems, since a lot of semi-truck drivers might actually quarantine themselves, and then we would have even worse issues with stores not stockpiling. And with power outages and stuff, throwing off the shipping companies, messing up their communications and stuff, it all definitely points to that being the Black Horseman. It definitely could fit. So anyways, the Shemitah year is once every 7 years that these market collapses often happen. I shouldn't say always, often happen. Also, food supplies globally are coming crashing to a halt, and inflation of gas, metal, food, car, all sorts of items is skyrocketing. $10 for a Whopper, unavailability of computer chips, video evidence of, as of May 2021, of extreme food shortages and inflation heading worldwide, and supply chain disruptions. And I just posted some videos when I was doing these notes in May, and there's tons more now. Here's a video. If we are experiencing severe shortages now, how bad will things get when the economy begins tanking again? This was by the Epic Economist, and it was just talking about all kinds of Costco has shortage of imported cheese thanks to shipping container constraints and delays at major U.S. ports. This has been going on since May, and it's a whole lot worse now. It's really coming to a head. Steel prices have tripled. Now Bank of America is sounding the alarm in May 2021. Steel stocks are on fire. U.S. Steel, which crashed to a record low in March amid bankruptcy sales, has skyrocketed 200%. We've seen tons of inflation on the dollar. Also, we've seen the price of like lumber and all kinds of building materials go through the roof. What we are going to fight against between now and the end of the year is inflationary input costs between raw materials, labors, and price/cost. The way it's looking, we may have to intervene at price again in certain of the businesses over the balance of the year. We think everybody in the restaurant industry is going to have to pass those costs along to the customers because of inflation, market-driven inflation. Dogecoin is now worth insane amounts.
By Michael Snyder's latest book, Lost Prophecies of the Future of America, now available on Amazon. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section down below.
So basically, price increases, it's the end of the world, and it's weird because it's like nobody even knows what's happening. Things are only going to get worse. Hoping for people to wake up and get ready for the poop to hit the fan 5 months ago. When the chips are down, these civilized people will eat each other. These videos perk me up every morning. Who needs coffee or tea? I'm rewatching blah 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 about the Great Depression, comparing it to current events. It's very chilling. We are literally being led to the bottomless cliff. Went to Costco yesterday. Shelves are full and deals are plentiful. Let's see. Shelves are full, but deals are still more expensive than they were. Lucky you. So this won't age well. So basically, this guy's saying I don't see anything wrong, but then other people are like, bro, it's gonna get bad. That's just one store. This guy's talking about preparing water. He's talking about prepping. Oh, the classic sci-fi hit movie Soylent Green was set in the year 2022. Sounds about right. That was about people eating humans because of starvation. They started selling Soylent Green, which was actually human bodies. Let's see. What else is here to get their daily dose of doom and gloom? With the state of the economy now, man's really got to invest in some digital currencies. I'm truly getting uneasy about this in my children's future. I feel it in my bones. This is the end as we know it. The scariest thing in the world is a hungry man. This is the best time of the year to sow your own crops. Go do that. Have you ever been hungry, had to struggle? You will be fine in that case. I've always stocked up. People are talking about stocking up food and preparing. Used cars are all-time high prices. I feel the calm before the storm has gone on a long time. It's time to stock up on everything. You know, when you read through comments like this, you get a sense of people, generally, the majority are very concerned. It's like taking a pulse on the nation / the world. It's time, folks, all caps. Start your prepper pantry now. So, they're calling for it being scary precursors in this video to great inflation and shortages, okay? That's starting in May. Here's
Ladies and
another
gentlemen.
one. Inflation, food shortages, supply chain breakdown, a whole video about it. Brace for impact, it's about to get much worse. He unlisted it, that's interesting, I don't know why. But, you can see the link right here, I just pasted it in. And this goes into a lot of detail, and then there's a lot of comments. Because of this podcast, I left my comfy home in the city and sold everything and left everyone and bought some acres outside the USA. It has fruit trees, chicken soup, chickens, bananas, avocados, tilapia, and small river. A 180 change in lifestyle, planning on creating a small community. That's pretty big! Aren't the people telling us about inflation blip is only temporary, the same that told us the shutdown would only last 3 weeks? People are talking about experimenting, planting seeds. Shortages. I've seen people freaking out over the cost of lumber. As a 12-year sawmill worker, let me tell you what's really going on. The mills are not getting the logs to produce at a rate necessary because of trucking, of lack of loggers wanting to work. It's not because of economic reasons. I've heard many economists saying it's all due to the fact environmental groups have held the industry hostage. Almost everyone I know is in denial. They're so naive and fully vaccinated. I'm losing patience because people are not willing to prep and we're losing time. They can always eat their mask. Believe me, it would be better to have her all in. I love her and don't want her to suffer. Yep, nothing wrong with being vegan. You have recognized depopulation as the agenda. Every time I shop, I'm finding things I want less and less. Every time I go to the grocery store, I'm spending $100 in the amount that would cost $50 last year. It's 4 months ago. We're about 9 meals away from total anarchy. Just let that sink in. I'm so tired of going out of my way to inform people what's going on and for them to look at me like I'm crazy. Stock up on cases of whiskey and other spirits, even if you don't drink, to barter with. I've been preparing for the last 5 years. I mean, people are really calling for all heck to break out food shortages. It's not just a lack of quantity. I mean, people are all super up in arms in this comment section. On and on and on about people buying acreage to raise wild animals, trying to survive off the land, expecting not to be able to buy anything at stores. So it's all there, all kinds of warnings. We are staring down the barrel of a confluence of several scenarios, each of which individually is a significant life-changing event, but which are together conspiring is a dangerous and incendiary situation. Food shortages, inflation, and a breakdown of the supply chain. A new media narrative today acknowledges food shortages and blames animal agriculture, indicating we are reaching an inflection point in the collapse. Expect things to accelerate from here. Let's have a conversation tonight about where we are, where we're heading, and how to prepare. This was May of 2021. He covers shipping, inflation, grains shortage, meat shortages, now you must eat GMO, huge narrative shift, and solutions. Man, I'd love to listen to some of this.
It's Friday, May 7th, 2021, from bad to worse. And in fact, the title of this video, to spend my whole day / Ice Age Farmer, when people were dying in mass. And I want to first talk about the shipping situation, where we saw that headline, Brace for Impact. The U.S. import demand is still rising. The container shortage is persisting. Record port volumes have not alleviated this. And while the line of ships that's been waiting to dock off the west coast in the ports there is now less than 20, there's some progress in emptying the queue there. It's still tremendous the amount of damage that's gone on, and the backlog and the expense for actually securing container storage has only continued to increase. So some of these analysts are saying things like, quote, "You ain't seen nothing yet." And I just want to remember to frame these quotes by the reality that there are already shortages of many consumer goods, that we already have a complete shutdown of the semiconductor industry and anything that relies on that, with car factories unable to produce cars because we can't get the chips. And those integrated circuits are in a lot of things. You already know this. You already know that this whole thing has been set up to falter. This is a generations-long plan in the making of the depopulation agenda, and they've just pulled the rug out now. That's why I want to have this conversation, so that we can really appreciate the gravity of where we are right now. The data shows that despite this deluge of inbound cargo, the import demand is not abating. In fact, it's increasing. It's getting worse. Importers are trying to catch up. Market capacity is in most cases oversold. No realistic improvement is on the horizon. In fact, it looks like it's just going to get worse, leading to more significant disruptions. Again, when you disrupt the supply chain, everything downstream from it falters. We're talking about farmers who can't get parts for their tractors, which further fuels the breakdown of the food supply. We're talking about, we've already seen warnings of gas shortages. Some people are already finding pumps empty, and that's expected to get worse through the summer, when they said about 30% of the gas supply won't be available. There's only 2/3 of it will be, and that makes problems with the trucking. So again, it's a series of cascading failures. And it may seem like this is a slow motion collapse, but in terms of economic cycles and really like societal changes, this is happening at light speed. All of this has really kicked off since the beginning of 2020, right, the pandemic. So it's actually, this is a collapse happening in light speed in social terms. Let's continue though. Here's another piece from American Shipper. Brace for a shipping tsunami. U.S. importers are going to face even more extreme delays ahead as our container capacity is maxed out. Again, we just can't even get these containers upon which the entire globalized economy depends for shipping parts and goods and pieces of frozen food back and forth, because that's the way the system has been built. Everything depends on this free-flowing goods back and forth, and it's not flowing freely right now. So the whole thing is collapsing. The number of container ships stuck at anchor off LA and Long Beach is now down to 20 from 30 a few months ago. Does this mean the capacity crunch is finally easing? No, absolutely not. Warned the VP of Global Ocean Freight
There's
Forwarding
like
Flexport. It's not getting better, it's getting worse.
Right now.
What I'm seeing is unprecedented. It's a
From what
tsunami
I've
of
seen,
freight.
or
During May,
at least,
everything
like,
is basically sold out.
several
We had one
hundred.
client who needed something loaded in May. It was very urgent. He was willing to pay 15 grand for a container, and even then, I couldn't get it. We couldn't even get this done with someone willing to pay whatever it takes. You can't buy it. It's like the food. It's not even a matter of price anymore. It's just not there. we're hitting the wall. We're bottoming out. Now, there is a deluge of more data indicating how rapidly the supply chain is collapsing downwind of this supply chain, of this shipping situation, but I now want to talk about inflation. The Bloomberg Commodity Spot Index has been rocketing up and continues to go nearly vertical throughout April, and this is a reflection of almost a basket of commodities rising up in prices. So when we're talking about commodities, clearly that's steel, which has been exploding in price, lumber, which is one that you probably have noticed as well if you've tried to build anything lately. Now, this is a problem. You really start to get the picture here. If we're not able to import things, then we'll need to build them. If we're not able to grow food, we'll need to build gardens and structures for our animals. But if we can't get wood or steel, if we can't afford it or we can't get it, period, then we won't be able to stand up systems to be able to feed our communities. And that's why, again, the bottom line tonight is that we need to be building our systems that allow us to produce these goods now, while there's still something available. Let's come back to that. Now, people, even food prices, of course, food prices are also rising, and that's the one thing I've been hearing the most from people. It's the most visible thing, because you viscerally feel that pain when you go try and feed your family at the supermarket, and you can barely walk out without something meaningful without paying a couple $100 at this point. It's for this reason, because people are becoming aware of it, that even the White House put out that message a few weeks ago saying, pay no attention to that inflation behind the curtain. This is a transitory thing. It's just a baseline effect because we had a shutdown last year, so naturally it's going to look like price. No, it's not any of these things. The media, of course, ran with those excuses and printed, this is not a big deal. It's going to look like there's some inflation, but it's not real. It's just, just nothing to see here, folks. Don't worry about it. The White House did actually mention in that memo that supply chain disruptions are playing into these inflation things, but they make the case that this is all because of the pandemic and it's going back to normal already, and so this is, again, it's transitory. This inflation you're seeing, not a big deal, don't sweat it. But we just heard from the experts in the shipping industry, it's not getting better, it's getting worse. So this argument, too, is fallacious. And certainly the White House memo did not speak to the fact that we have printed more dollars than you can even shake a stick at just in the past year. There is literally a vertical line in 2020, and you hear Biden saying we need even more stimulus because of that bad jobs report. So they are, by design, it's a controlled demolition of all the systems that feed and clothe and house most people. It's being done. They're grinding us into the dirt. And we need to get off of their systems. So that's not being talked about at all. Now, I don't want to get too far into inflation because actually more and more people are talking about that. That's a good thing. If you are wanting to see some of the parallels behind what's going on now to Weimar, which I previously said this is a very Weimar-like hyperinflationary scenario, I recommend you check out this video by George Gammon. Michael Burry warns of hyperinflation, where he puts side by side the charts and the data about how the Weimar Republic printed a ton of money and it gave them basically a sugar high. Things felt good for a little while there. So long as the government could spend money it didn't have faster than the volume could fall, Germany had the war and life as usual. But then ultimately, it's not sustainable. It's a helpful video to compare the history, just like I've done with solar cycles. Like what happened during the Monroe minimum, so what can we expect to happen now? It's the same sort of thing. What happened when they printed more money than ever before? How did that play out for them? Well, we know it turned the wheelbarrows full of dollars. Here it's going to be different. It'll be your digital dollars, and this digital currency won't be something you can spend anywhere. It will be used to guide your behavior. You can only spend that money on plant-based foods, not on meat. You can only spend that money on, right, you get the idea. These are additional controls that are being implemented through, it's not even a currency at this point. It's money at the slave store, the company store. Now I want to talk about the food situation. Although I've been talking about it a lot, it's just important to mix this into the equation of these other factors as well now. Because when I said in October of 2019 that the USDA was lying, I interviewed a top 1% producer who said they were lying, they were understating the losses and overstating the yields, and that at some point, he said there is a force that is trying to give the impression at the USDA that everything was all right. Trying a force and energy, working to keep people unaware of the severity of the situation, but that we were running below pipeline levels. In other words, we're burning through our food supply right now, and at some point there will be a day of reckoning. Without that information, farmers aren't able to adjust their plantings, the market cannot act to ration supply. We've talked about this a lot. What happens when the US and the world, indeed, runs out of grain, was the question I asked back in October 2019. Well, now, sadly, I wish it weren't true, but now we do have the answer. Prices are going vertical. Food prices are exploding. The Bloomberg Agri Spot Index has increased 87% just in the last couple months here, and food prices will then do the same. All these things take time to percolate down. And in fact, for the past year, a lot of this has been absorbed by companies throughout the supply chain who were reticent to raise their prices. But now that everyone's talking about inflation, now that it's called inflation expectation, now that that has increased as well, then it really starts to become a snowball effect. It's a cascading thing where you say, well, gosh, I need to raise my prices so I can still make money here, so I can still conduct business profitably. But if I raise it 10%, that's only going to last me like a week since everybody else is raising their prices. So I might as well raise my prices 20% just to buy me a little bit of time before I piss off my customers even more. And so that action actually increases the velocity as well. So you can see it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, this relationship between inflation expectations and actual inflation. And that's what's happening right now as all the price increases are finally rolling out. Retailers, producers, everywhere along the way are finally raising their prices. That's happening now, even as we begin to appreciate everything that I was talking about in September 2019 when I said, we're not running out of grains here. What's going to happen? Well, now the big banks are starting to say, we're running out of food. Deutsche Bank said that, was saying that this is going to cause social unrest. This is from Zero Hedge. Deutsche Bank, Jim Reed, noted this Bloomberg Agricultural Spot Index had increased 70% year over year and said that's more than it's ever gone up in a decade here. It's going to create remarkable geopolitical risk for riots and for wars. And that's what happens when food prices explode. People can't afford to eat. They take to the streets. Of course, Deutsche Bank was only repeating the warning that was issued by Rabobank here in March when they said they released their biblical lean and mean report, talking about how they couched this whole thing in the story of Joseph, where there were 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine, and they were saying, yeah, we're going into the famine now. And this whole report talks about Pharaoh and Joseph's dream and Technicolor Dreamcoat language. There's tongue in cheek because they're sitting there in their bank ivory tower where they're going to be able to eat no matter what. But what they're describing is that food prices are exploding, and particularly for third world countries and countries that depend on imports from the breadbasket countries, they're in a world of hurt right now. We see every day more and more steps. Russia, just a couple days ago, put a new limit on the amount of wheat that they're willing to export. And as Ukraine, Russia, Brazil, Argentina also just increased the duties because Brazil was so hungry they were starting to come for their grains, and Argentina said, whoa, no. So as these breadbasket countries, these major exporters, shut down that flow of food out to keep their own domestic population fed and prices under control, the importers are, we heard actually that the agricultural minister of Turkmenistan said, if you put a cap on how much you're willing to export to us, you are dooming us to starvation. This is not a word you hear frequently between diplomats, right? This tells you that it's a meaningful impact when the breadbasket countries stop their exports. In fact, it's exactly what was described by George Soros-funded, John Podesta-run food chain reaction game back in 2015, where they foresaw a pandemic disrupting the supply chains and causing a global food crisis. Of course, the outcome that came out of that whole exercise, which was also run by Cargill, one of the world's biggest food companies, was a global carbon tax. You can see where this whole thing is running. That's why I call it an engineered food shortage. So again, the reports I just mentioned from the banks talking about how we're now going into 7 years of famine and the third world is going to be hurting and we're in intense geopolitical risk, all of that is based on now. And now flows from the crop losses and the fact that we were running at below pipeline levels for the last 2 years, since 2019, as I covered, right? I'm not making this up. And now what's happening is that it's the same thing. Just as we talked about the shipping, it's getting worse. You haven't even seen anything yet. The same thing is true with food production. Brazil had a terrible season with their soybeans, tremendous precipitative extremes, like that we would expect during a grand solar minimum, that delayed the harvest of soybeans and meant that the saffron crop, as they call it, was very delayed. So delayed, in fact, that each week as they come out with their new crop progress numbers, it's just gone down straight downhill. From bad to worse. And Arlen Suderman here is saying, with their saffron crop failing as badly as it is, we're going to need to significantly have more corn coming out of the United States. That's the bottom line. We need more corn. He just says it's required. He doesn't say what happens if we don't get it. We need more acres or above trend yields. We need a ton of corn coming out of the U.S. this year, and soybeans. It's required. Of course, Arlen is not going to say, or else the whole thing is going to come crashing down, right? Or else global trade and food prices are going to explode through the roof. The problem, ladies and gentlemen, is that it's not shaping up to be a good season for the United States. We've got a tremendous drought going on. You can see reported here yesterday, 9 of the 10 top U.S. corn states reported abnormal dryness or severe drought on 42% or more of acreage this week. These precipitative extremes are happening as well here. And in fact, we're currently in a cold spell in a lot of the corn belt, which is, it's not frosting, it's not frozen, but it's cold enough that it is affecting germination. And I've heard from a lot of producers who are saying, it's not looking good. Sometimes, especially the bigger producers who are under contract, are required by those big ag companies, Monsanto, the players, Syngenta, they are required to, by contracts, to plant their crops when they're told to. And those orders went out, and so those seeds are in the ground. But now it's very cold, and now they're planting into the dust, and so they know. They already know, and they're telling me yields aren't going to be here this year. So even as we hear Arlen saying, we require a really good crop out of the U.S. for the whole global food situation to stay operational, I'm hearing it's not going to happen. So I'm saying, just like the shipping guy said, we're not even fully seeing the effects. We are not even in the food crisis yet. And already we're at record decadal highs for corn and soybeans. We ain't seen nothing yet, to borrow his phraseology. So it's not just the global grains crisis. All of these things have been mounting. Today, reported in the mainstream media. In the mainstream media, we're hearing about meat shortages. Again, restaurants facing a nationwide chicken shortage. Family-owned restaurants around the U.S. are struggling to keep a steady supply of chicken tenders, wings, and breasts on their plates due to a nationwide poultry shortage. Oops, that was supposed to be before. It's about how large the drought, how bad the drought conditions are across many parts of the U.S. And this is about how bad the drought is in South America. It's so bad, not only has it affected the saffron crop, but the levels of the rivers have gone down, and they can't even float barges there to export their grains. So their yields were reduced, and even that they did grow, they can't get out because, here, quote, barges are carrying less than their usual load. The situation is so desperate in Paraguay, the country is begging Brazil to please release some water so we can export our grains and feed the rest of the world. So it's just staggering. But back to the proteins. We have a chicken shortage. We're also expecting to see beef running into shortages as well. Here's a message from national farmers who are saying you can expect to see short supplies of beef at the counter. Our exports are collapsing, down 28% week over week and down 18% versus the average because it's not there, because we're running out of beef to export at this point. So we've already taken a look in the past at how our frozen protein shortages, frozen beef, frozen chicken, have all dropped precipitously over the last year throughout the pandemic. So we've already eaten through that buffer. We no longer have that reserve to draw upon from our frozen meat stocks. So given this global grain shortage, given the protein shortages, of course, the establishment is starting to really ratchet up their rhetoric around, well, we might need to go ahead and have GMOs. Now you're just going to have to do it. You're going to have to accept GMO now that we've got global warming. That's the carte blanche for everything, because Club of Rome says it's a climate emergency. So Bloomberg, the cure for our food shortages, and this is the seismic change that's happening right now, is that the media, and this is how you know we're at that demarcation point, we're going to start feeling the food shortages now, because they've started putting in place the scripting to suggest to you the solutions. This is the problem, reaction, solution, Hegelian dialectic, that I know you know this by heart by now. You've heard it so many times. They've played it so many times, tried and tested. But when you see Bloomberg saying, well, now that we got these food shortages, you're going to have to eat GMO. It was the same argument that we heard from the CEO of the bio-barcode company Annika that I mentioned in my previous report. He said, well, consumers are just going to have to change their behavior because climate change. You're not going to be able to eat unless you eat GMO. So this is their excuse. This is their wedge to force a change in diet. It's exactly what the Eat Lancet Commission told us they were going to do, is force a complete fundamental transformation of our food supply because of climate change. And indeed, it's happening. All of their stated goals, get off animal agriculture, end meat and dairy. We're seeing the scripting being laid here right now. From food unique to China, here's Bloomberg. Just a couple days ago, look at this headline. Feeding chickens is so costly that it's changing global trade flows. Some feed makers in the US and China are now changing to wheat. We talked about how they're reformulating their animal feed, trying to move away from corn and soybeans and using wheat, but wheat prices are on the rise. That's why Russia just stopped their exports. And feeding the world's chickens, pigs, and cows has gotten so expensive, it's upending global trade flows. Please pay attention to the narrative that's being constructed in real time right now before our eyes. It's because of livestock. It's because of animal agriculture that we're having a food crisis. And even this even intimates that the whole supply chain might be affected because we're too busy trying to feed China's animals. This is a stunning shifting of the blame to try and pin animals as the reason that everything is hitting the fan right now. As grain prices surge, American chicken giant Purdue has taken the rare steps of buying soybeans from Brazil. This has also happened just a week ago. The U.S. is now importing soybeans from Brazil. We're one of the biggest producers in the world. Why are we exporting all of our soybeans to China, but then being forced to buy them from Brazil? Yeah, we're not making sense here. There's no good leadership here. But these tactics highlight how tight the global market has become. Grain prices at an 8-year high. The cost of feeding animals and higher meat prices will be coming for animals. But this article, links to everything are below. And I would encourage you to read this article because it's very telling of that they are creating this argument that now there's a food crisis and it's because of the animals. It's because we can't feed them and you. And
all right, so this is a little bit outdated because it's from May of this year and we're in October. So it's 5 months ago, but it still gives a definite projection of things about to get worse. That's the title of the video. Brace for Impact, About to Get Much Worse by Ice Age Farmer. So basically, he's presenting a lot of evidence here, thoroughly going through all these different areas where there's a food crisis in the making. It's been being led up to for a couple of years and it's coming to a head. And I've heard reports since the time of this all over the place of things getting really bad, and I've heard all kinds of stuff in the news about people killing like thousands of cows or whatever because they were not able to get them to market for whatever reason. They were killing them and just wasting it, and people pouring out millions of gallons of milk because they're not able to get the milk to the market because of the truck driver shortages and stuff. I've just been hearing all this really wild sounding stuff. A lot of that's not on mainstream media. I've stopped listening to mainstream media. I primarily will listen to InfoWars or naturalnews.com. And I look through BitChute.com. I look through their homepage looking for headlines and stuff, and I'll watch videos on that website because I feel like YouTube is way too censored, and so are all the main media sources. So then there's also an expected total market crash video here and my Black Horseman clues.
We are creating out of nothing to keep a dead economy. I'm telling you, dead economy going because the baby boom stopped spending and still are in their lowest stages into 2022-23, and we have the highest debt ratios. Oh, and how do they deal with the debt crisis? Add more financial asset by printing money and putting it into stocks. Stocks are so disconnected from the real economy. If you're sitting in stocks, you should be in terror.
Okay, so
they're going to have to crash soon.
Let's get to my favorite subject. Why is it crash, and why didn't it crash, and when's it coming? But more importantly, what can we do? Because I agree 100% with you. This one is going to be the biggest in world history. I mean, we're not the only guys saying this. Records are saying, a lot of guys are saying, this one is going to be the biggest in world history. And it always happens just after the peak, when we're peaking right now.
Yes, we are peaking right now. Now, again, the demographics already peaked in 2007, but they pumped it up into now. I mean, all artificial. So this bubble is worse. And I think it normally would be like the 29 to 32 crash, 80 to 90%. They may just still, even when governments fail, and they are going to fail, they're going to be so embarrassed. But they may keep it from going as low as I see the Dow as low as 5,000 and at best 12 to 13,000 in a couple of years from now. That's going to wipe out a lot of wealth. Real estate doesn't fall as fast as stock, but real estate fell 34%, as you guys know. In the last downturn, it's going to be 40 to 50% this time.
Harry, and the sad part about it is, the people we hang around with, I better buy a house now because the prices are going up. I'm going, why don't you wait a year?
They're all doing it.
People are panicking in. I have to buy one. No, I mean, I'm in Puerto Rico and I may have to buy one because there's nothing to rent here, but I'm only going to buy, I only have 2 real deals I'm looking at. Otherwise, I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And Puerto Rico is nowhere near as overvalued as Miami and New York and San Francisco.
Well, that's why when they measure inflation, that's CPI, Consumer Price Index, but they don't measure Asset Price Index. Yeah. And so anyway, let's go. Why is it going to crash, Harry? Why is it going to crash?
And when?
Okay, I think there's 2 periods. Right now, between late April and early June, I'm seeing the potential top forming. I'll tell you, the problem I have now, there is no logic. The stock should have peaked before this, okay?
Right.
On my cycles, when I take the technology cycles, the most powerful, and the demographic, because the technology cycles are actually more powerful. Stocks should have peaked in late 2019, early 2020, just as they did when COVID hit. But when COVID hit, the government, it was such a shock, the government just went off the charts. That's when we got this 55% of GDP spending. I mean, if anybody 10 years from now or 20 years from now, when I'm probably likely dead, looks back at this and doesn't say these people were they smoking? Just to think you could just print money and not deal with what happens if you're a business and your industry slows down. You have to cut costs and refocus and all this stuff. Well, we didn't do that. Oh no, you just print money and gloss it over and then crawl out of it. You know what this recovery's been since 2009? 1.6% GDP growth a year for 12 years. The worst recovery in all of history. And you think, well, the stock market will be going, ho, hum, ho. No, stock market looks like the best boom in all of history. The stock market is full of crap, okay, period. And it's going to fall to get down to this reality because the economy not only is overvalued because it's been growing so slow, without the stock market stimulus of at least the rich people feeling more, wealthy and spending more, the average person hasn't spent more or earned more in 20, 30 years.
They've got more. They've got more from the government.
Anything they did, they got from the government, which is also unhealthy. You can't make things work by giving people things for free.
Right.
So number one lesson I've learned in life, number one above all other things, other than there may be a God somewhere, is you don't get something for nothing, period. If you do get something for nothing, bend over because you're getting ready to get a really painful experience.
Okay. Oh, here's what the young kids don't understand, and they're like, we get all this money, or anybody, we get all this money. Oh, this is great. This is great. This is great. What they don't see is there's going to be a big price to pay. They don't see
where did it come from?
Yeah.
If you could just create prosperity by printing money, then why didn't we do this 100, 200 years ago? Are we stupid now? No. This is. I am going on record. I've been saying this for years. Before I die or just after, people are going to realize this was the stupidest, most idealistic, ill-informed economic policies in all of history. You thought the roaring 20s was a bubble and burst. This is going to make that look like nothing because it's all assets globally and everything's going to burst except the highest quality treasury bonds and financial assets.
What's going to bring it down? What are we looking at? What are the key factors that are going to?
No, it just gets so extreme. I mean, the economy keeps every recovery is like limp. Stocks go up because money coming in. Oh, and they push interest rates lower. When interest rates go lower, real estate and stocks go higher just because of artificially low interest rates.
Harry,
it's all fake. You guys understand that, right? Fake?
I understand that.
Harry, this is where you piss off guys like me because you say gold's going to go to zero, silver's going to go to zero.
No, not zero.
Oh,
no, gold is going to hold up better than any other major commodity. But
you said $400.
Gold did go down in 2008 at the worst of crisis. It will go down again.
Harry, please listen. So look, for the economy to stay up, they've got to keep interest rates low. They raise interest rates, the bond market crashes. So how in the world can you recommend high-quality treasuries? Is there such a thing?
Oh, there is.
All right, so now they're just debating about what kind of things, whether it's gold or treasury bonds, you should buy into to hedge yourself against the coming market crash. Getting into that, and that's a little bit outside of the scope of this particular thing I'm trying to go through. So basically, we've got major market crash projected, a huge bubble, possibly and most likely. That's going to all come crashing down during the Shemitah year, when every other stock market crash in the history of the U.S. has happened during Shemitah years. We've got a Shemitah year next year. The experts are projecting a crash around that time, and that happens to be when the Black Horseman of the Apocalypse on my timeline is. So that's super confirmation. We've got drought and farm shortages predicted globally in this video.
Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So today I want to talk about why it's more important now more than ever before in the history of this channel to have your pantry stacked sky high to the rafters for fall 2021. It is time to load the boats. Let's talk about it. Canada is in one of the worst droughts it's ever been in. Many states, Arizona, North Dakota, California, one of the biggest droughts ever. We're looking at record wildfire seasons. We're looking at potential water shortages this year. You have the government in the United States possibly declaring an emergency for the first time ever, I believe, because the Colorado River is at its lowest extent ever, and they're potentially going to be declaring a water shortage emergency. So you need to load the boats right now. That's all I'm going to say, because this wild weather on top of all the other service disruptions that we've been experiencing lately and other calamity, which appears to be culminating the world over. There was a dust storm here the other day, and we thought it was rain. It was almost like a mirage in a way, because it really looked like rain. Now these dust storms are struggling with the same thing, wetter and wetter. And it's something to do with the increased global average temperature and the result of increased precipitation, and that downpour usually happening near the coastal areas. So the hotter interior areas, the moisture gets sucked up out of the ground because it's warmer, goes up into the air, and it gets dumped in the coastal regions. So the moisture is being taken out of the central regions. That's, of course, where most countries grow all their crops, their grains, lentils, wheat, corn, that type of thing. And this, of course, could potentially contribute to some shortages this year from farmers. The only benefit to this unusually dry and hot weather that we're experiencing right now is the lack of bugs. bugs. There are no mosquitoes out here, and that's a rarity for this part of the world. So I'll take that anyways. It's been so dry in this neck of the woods for the last few years that a city a couple hours south of me, they were experiencing water lines bursting and electrical fires, malfunctions, because the ground was actually shifting because it was so dry. Fortunately, agricultural technology still has us generating a surplus of food every year. But one of my primary concerns at this point in time is because people are now conditioned to panic buy. We've seen it with the toilet paper, we've seen it with the gas shortages. It would not take a whole heck of a lot to get people to start panic buying food. And I think once that happens, we would see a run on the grocery stores like we've never seen before. Last year, people weren't really stockpiling a whole lot of food. People were primarily stocking up on what appeared to be non-essential items. If we see a continuing economic downtrend, if we see tensions escalate in the Middle East, if we see an increase in supply chain disruptions, if the pandemic has another resurgence, if we do experience a severe drought and wildfire season, which is going to drastically impact agriculture output, then I think that in fall of 2021, people are going to be scrambling to stockpile. So as a prudent citizen who might anticipate such things, I think the onus is on us to try to maximize our exploits right now while the getting is good and while the prices are reasonably low. In spite of these shortages, the farmers are talking about how commodity prices are high, so they're happy regardless of really what the crop yields are. Even if it's 20% crop yield this year, they're probably going to make the same amount of money because from their perspective, the price of commodities are up anywhere between 20 to 90%. So things are going to be good until they're not good anymore. And this is just the start of all this. Remember, SHTF, as we've learned in the last year and a half, is going to be a slow burn situation. When you're talking about worldwide water shortages, depleting aquifers, glacial melts, we're talking about a slow burn marathon of SHTF. It's not something that's just going to happen overnight. It's not just, there's going to be a crop failure one year and all of a sudden it's going to be SHTF.
All right, so that's just more evidence. Those are some videos you can check out for more evidence. I've watched them all already. But that was just all of that. All these things, it's a perfect storm of a Shemitah year and a lot of fear and panic in the population and people worried about food and worried about security and worried about major lockdowns. And then we have major stock market collapse expected, a majorly inflated US dollar. We got all-time debt and money printing going on. And we've got drought and farm shortages, which were predicted for this year, and I believe they actually did. There were shortages, not just predicted, but those actually happened, which we can say in retrospect. And I believe I've seen reports of that. So basically, we're all queued up for a disastrous winter, and people are saying it. People are making the joke like winter is coming. It's going to be a tough winter. Those are some of the headlines you'll see. It is why this winter may be brutal, one of the worst in years. Let's see this one.
It's hard to think about winter when many regions are broiling in the sun right now, but there are enough indicators out there that this winter may be especially brutal. We may have another record-breaking winter in the northern hemisphere. Scientists, climatologists, and meteorologists are all reporting a perfect storm of conditions coming together to brew up a winter as we've never really seen before. In this video, I will explain these conditions as best that I can. Now, I'm not a meteorologist, obviously, by any means, but I can follow the science enough to know that if you're in Europe or the United States, you should be paying attention. And as I've shown in other videos, our aging infrastructure isn't equipped to handle the extended periods of extreme cold that are currently being predicted. Just ask anyone in Texas about that, as almost the entire state was left without power for many days this past February due to the extreme cold. Ice on sagging power lines and frozen pipes could result in an outage that can quickly escalate to a disaster for many. At the end of this video, I'll give you a warning I would encourage you to heed. But for now, here's why this winter might be especially brutal. Please consider subscribing to our newsletter by clicking on the link in the description and comment section below. If you enjoy this video, please subscribe and click the like button to help the channel grow. Polar vortex. The first piece of this colder than average weather prediction is a polar vortex. A polar vortex is a low pressure, vast expanse of swirling cold air that is parked in the polar region. During winter, the polar vortex at the North Pole expands, sending cold air southward. This happens on a regular basis, but not all cold weather that comes your way is caused by polar vortex per se. When a powerful polar vortex forms like the one we're seeing beginning to form even now, it spins in a counterclockwise direction and is specifically held at bay because of the jet stream moving east to west. As the pressure drops in the polar vortex, this wind speed in the vortex increases. Scientists look at the strength of the stratospheric jet stream to determine the future intensity of the polar vortex and its potential influence on winter weather. Current forecasts, compared to the long-term average, show that the late September strength of the polar vortex is likely to be higher than usual. Scientists are saying that they see a more energetic start to the polar vortex than they've seen in years past. The QBO in the North Atlantic jet stream. The quasi-biennial oscillation, or QBO, oscillates in the east
so
because what factors in inflation. In a forecast La Nina season, better than average winters in the Pacific cold snap that took down the Texas power grid. Periods of cold like that, as the temperatures drop to deadly levels. Temperatures drop and the power goes out. The most important thing to remember is that your neighbors are assets and, well, liabilities. Banding together makes it easier for everyone involved. Countless stories were coming out from the Texas snowpocalypse of neighbors pooling resources, lending extras, and coming together to stay warm and find a solution. And that's great. A warm plenty. Keep your preps a well-guarded secret, but start the conversation. A might turn to you after disaster, costs and resources.
Alright, so he's just talking about prepping and stuff after that. So basically, we have potentially a brutal weather winter, potentially a market crash coming up, and also drought, farm shortages, meat shortages, inflation, all this stuff. So it looks like we're already entering a 1 year period that's going to be brutal. And it fits the Black Horseman of the apocalypse, and it's a Shemitah year. So it all fits for September 2021 through September 2022, or approximately that time frame of this all going down.